Hello everybody, welcome back to the Culinary Barn. I have another recipe for you today and it is spring. It's spring. The last video we talked about, it was spring, but it actually really feels like spring now. It's beautiful and sunny out today and it's warm and I am thinking spring. I'm thinking spring colors, spring flavors. So the recipe I'm doing for you today is one I make often. It's one I learned in Italy, and it's a ricotta cake, but it's an upside down cake. So think back to the 1970s, 80s, the classic pineapple upside down cake, but we're zhuzhing it up a little bit with spring flavors, and we're making it a little bit more moist by adding fresh ricotta. And for those spring flavors, we all know this very well, come April, May, rhubarb. So this is some fresh rhubarb, and it's going to be part of our upside down alongside some Italian black plums. So we've got a plum rhubarb upside down ricotta cake. It's a long title, but it's going to be good. And this is one that is great to serve for a dinner party or a luncheon. But in fact, if you were in Italy, you would probably make this the day before and then serve it for breakfast the next morning with a nice espresso or a cup of tea. So we're going to get right into it. It's a very easy recipe to put together. And of course, you can swap out any fruit that you like that's seasonal. You can do this with peaches, apricots, strawberries, whatever you want to use. So into a bowl, I've got some softened, unsalted butter. I always like to use unsalted butter for savory as well as baking. That way I can just control the salt myself. So into the bowl, some softened, unsalted butter. And to that, we're going to add just some simple white sugar. There you go. And then you can also flavor this any way you want. If you wanted to use cinnamon, you could use honey, you could use vanilla like we're going to today. You could use tonka, which is those little hard kind of vanilla flavored beans. If you happen to find those would be nice. But if you wanted an almond flavor, you could use almond extract. Again, you can play around with the flavors here. I'm just going to put kind of a generous teaspoon in. And then I'm just going to start whisking these ingredients together. Handy old whisk. Once you've got your softened butter, sugar, and vanilla all combined, you're going to add in 3 eggs. And then whisk all this together. Once the eggs are fully combined and you've got a smooth batter, we're going to add in some fresh ricotta. And this is dried ricotta. You don't want it to be overly moist. So if you buy ricotta from the grocery store and it seems overly wet, just squeeze it with a clean kitchen towel, or if you have the time, just drain it in a fine mesh sieve just to get the excess whey out. Otherwise, it'll make the cake a little bit too moist. So in with the ricotta, and then you'll mix this in as well. And that is everything for the wet ingredients. And then in this bowl, I've just got some regular all-purpose flour. And to this, I like the idea of a little bit of cardamom. So this is ground cardamom. I think it goes really well with plums as well as rhubarb. You don't want to go overboard with it. I'm just going to do about a teaspoon. And then I've got baking powder and a little bit of salt in here. This is going in as well. And then I'm just going to give this a little mix just to make sure everything's combined. And then the dry into the wet. And I'm going to switch to a spatula. And just gently fold everything together. You can, of course, do this in a stand mixer, but it's a pretty easy cake to pull together by hand. And when I learned it in Italy, I had to do it by hand. I'm just going to set the cake batter to the side just for a moment while we prepare the fruit. So we're going to do a little bit of a pre-cook on the fruit. Nothing too long, just about 5-8 minutes or so. So into a skillet, I'm just going to put a little bit of white sugar and just a touch of water. Now for the fruit. So for the plums, we're just going to remove the center And then I'm just going to do these into small wedges, probably about 8 to 10 slices per plum. This is going to depend on how big your plums are. And then into the pan, I'm just going to lay them on the flat, one of the flat sides in a concentric circle. And I'm going to alternate the circles with some of the rhubarb. So I'm just going to take these tops off here. This is very fresh, very tender rhubarb. If it was a little older or woodier, you would want to take off some of the exterior fiber just by running your knife down and then just pulling it off like that. But this is very young and tender, so we don't need to do that. And I'm just going to essentially match the height of the slices of plum with the pieces of rhubarb. And these will cook at pretty much the same time. And then I'm just going to shingle in slices of rhubarb in amongst the plum. Once you've got all your fruit laid on the bottom, I'm just going to put this on the hob just over a medium flame. And again, just for about like 5 to 8 minutes, just to caramelize the sugar and just start to cook the fruit. And I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees because as soon as the fruit is soft, we're going to put the cake batter on top, and then this is going to go right into the oven in this same skillet. All right, I've just pulled the fruit from the heat, and we've got a nice like sticky purpley syrup on the bottom. And then again, in this same skillet, now the batter is very thick. It's supposed to be very thick. We're just gonna this on top. And then just gently with an offset spatula, just move the cake batter around so it's out to the sides of the skillet and covering the fruit. And the cake batter will kind of go down a little bit in between the pieces of fruit. And then once this comes out of the oven, we'll invert it and we'll see the fruit on top, as well as some of those gorgeous purple and crimson syrupy juices that we'll collect in the bottom. All right, that is all nice and even. This is going into, again, a preheated 350 degree oven. And this is going to take probably around 35 minutes, depending on if you're using a regular or convection oven. All right, and here is our gorgeous upside down cake, nice and golden brown on top, and it's just bubbling around the edges. You can let this rest for maybe 2-3 minutes or so, but you don't want it to fully cool before you try and invert it. You still want it to be soft and syrupy on the bottom so that it comes out. So I'm just going to run a little offset spatula around the side. And if you just shake the pan, it should be kind of like shimmying in the pan. And that's how you'll know that it'll come out, hopefully, cleanly. So I'm just going to do this on a lipped serving platter here. I would suggest if you are doing the inversion of anything that might have a little bit of syrup on the bottom, do it on something with a lip so that none of the syrup falls off the edge. All right, the moment of truth. Et voila. All right, I'm just going to let this cool fully, and then I'll do a little dusting of powdered sugar. And if you wanted to serve this as a dessert, you could, of course, do some creme fraiche on the side, or a little whipped cream, or even some vanilla ice cream would be nice. But there you have a very simple, took barely any time, an upside down plum and rhubarb ricotta cake.